Welcome to the Small Business Surgeon Podcast, the show where we dissect the businesses of top producers, examine their growth strategies, and share with you the bare bones of their success. I am your host, Samuel Smith, and I'm glad you're here. Let's operate. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to this week's episode of the Small Business Surgeon Podcast. And guys, today we are in for an absolute treat. I am thrilled to welcome a powerhouse from the business world, a gentleman who has led iconic brands through some of the most transformative periods in their history. The former CEO of not just one, but two industry giants, 7-Eleven and Blockbuster Video, here to share his journey with us, as well as discuss his new book, Education is Freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Mr. Jim Keys. Jim, welcome.
Great to be here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on. I put a little bit of thought into that intro there. I'm very, very pleased to be getting to chat with you today. So, dude, welcome to the show. For those that don't know, just give us a real brief rundown of who you are, Jim, and why we're here today.
Sure. Yeah, I am, as you mentioned, been fortunate to run a couple of very large, iconic brands. So it's been I've had quite an adventure throughout my career. And most recently, I've been trying to channel some of the learnings from that experience into helping others find their success. So I've actually written a book called Education is Freedom. And I'm spending a fair amount of time talking about the principles in the book, primarily being the ability to manage change, because as you mentioned, 7-Eleven, Blockbuster, both are companies that have gone through huge transformations over the years. And I think the learnings are applicable, whether it's a small business and you're trying to help an entrepreneur, or if it's a Fortune 500 company. The challenges are the same. It's a difference of decimal point.
They scale, huh? The challenges scale.
It's a little scale issue. Yeah.
So, man, I am just a huge fan of yours and your career. But the show is about like entrepreneurship and getting going and finding traction. So can you take us back to the beginning and what it was that initially sparked your interest in business and in leadership?
Well, interestingly, I started flipping burgers at McDonald's. And you think about that, people don't think about that as an entrepreneurial opportunity, right? It's a job. Well, and it's a minimum wage job.
We all start there, though. There's so many entrepreneurs and hustlers I've known have come out of kitchens and fast food.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But what I discovered in that role is that that hard work can pay off. Because, as you look around, and here's just a microcosm, I mentioned just a couple decimal points, right? The difference between running a McDonald's and running a company like 7-Eleven, it's truly, there are more similarities than differences, because even in that tiny micro environment of a one-off McDonald's store, you have payroll, right? You have employee issues, human resources issues. You have inventory. You have to balance inventory against cash. You have shrink. You have theft. Those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, you have to balance it and make it all work. And ironically, that experience was my first exposure to business. I was made a shift manager.
Oh, wow.
At McDonald's. Yeah. And so at 16 years old, here I am running the night shift, having to balance the cash drawer at the end of the night and manage the inventory balances. And it was a fascinating exposure to what business really was all about.
Most 16-year-olds don't react that way to responsibility.
Well, you're right. You're right. And I think what I discovered is that that most people also don't respond to the need for hard work. I mean, let's face it, if you look around at the grand landscape of people, many, many people like to get as much money as they can for as little work as possible.
Yeah.
It's natural. It's a natural inclination. So I looked around the environment at McDonald's and I said, these people are just coming to work. They don't really, they're not into this for a career or anything. If I work harder than them, that's going to be pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
So how did I get to be a shift manager? I just outworked everybody else, and I did all the jobs no one else wanted to do.
Right, right. You show
And
up
it
on
paid off.
time and you do what you say you're going to do, and you're more reliable than the next guy. You're the one that gets called on when it's time for the promotion.
Which ironically is the role of an entrepreneur. They do the jobs nobody else wants to do, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
true. It's
I
true.
I think they rebel against the boss. I think
Yeah, a
that's
little of
that's
that.
that's the job of the entrepreneur there.
Little of that. But ironically, I learned to be an entrepreneur at McDonald's because I had to be the outlier. I had to be the one willing to do the things no one else
Hmm.
wanted.
Hmm.
And I was rewarded as a result for that. And it fed that entrepreneurial spirit that I carried from that small micro environment into a big corporation. My first job was with Gulf Oil,
Hmm.
and I acted the same because I saw that same opportunity to be an entrepreneur. You don't think of entrepreneurs in a corporation,
No, you're right. You don't.
right? It's an oxymoron.
But I do know from being in the oil field. I was a landman for many years, and that's where I got my first real taste of success. And it was in a corporate world where you showed up early and you worked harder than the next guy, and you didn't maybe go and drink as much at happy hour as the next two, and you had some productive afternoons. I know how much room for improvement there is amongst the oil industry. I found it very easy as a hard worker to get to the top.
Exactly, exactly. But what you also probably found is something I discovered. There's a lot of peer pressure not to perform, right?
You make them look bad. Yes,
Right,
yes,
exactly.
yes.
And this is the
Hmm.
thing that kills it's a great lesson for entrepreneurs because what kills a company as a company gets bigger
Hmm.
is that entrepreneurial spirit now can get snuffed out by the people that don't want you making them look bad.
No, you're right.
So and that's what happens. So the entrepreneur's still working his butt off, but he's now got an organization full of people, many of whom have that negative point of view about hard work and say, they don't want someone to stand out.
Right,
So they
right.
discourage that outlier and discourage entrepreneurialism. So the lesson there for a small company is don't get big company disease,
Yeah. Now,
right?
how do you go about avoiding that though? Because that just seems to be something that over time can creep in.
It can creep in and there are many ways to do it. Jack Welch at General Electric
Hmm.
had a very harsh way of doing it, but it worked for them. He basically said, "Look, I'm gonna cut 10% of you every year, and I'm gonna do you a favor because 10% of you aren't cut, and
Right.
I'm gonna take 10% of the entire organization out every year because I'm doing you a favor because you want to work less and we're not the right place for you.
Mm.
So if you don't want to step up, then you're going to be one of that 10% that gets cut. And by the way, you'll find a job in an environment that's more favorable to you." It sounded harsh, but it worked for General Electric for many years that they were able to prevent that complacency from creeping into the big organization by being aggressive and cutting the fat,
I
if you will.
like that. That's a
Yeah,
good. I've heard that strategy before, but like,
yeah,
is that an effective thing in the real world? Because like, I know business is survival of the fittest. So the more you think about it, the slow ones at the back need to get nipped so that the ones that are
yeah,
hard workers can get properly rewarded.
yeah.
They're just
Now,
slowing them down.
it's just one approach. I'm not personally, I think there are other ways to do it. That call that the stick approach versus the carrot approach.
Right, right, right. So,
So the stick is out there ready to chop your head off at any
mhm,
minute. That doesn't lead to the best environment. The other way, which I prefer, is to create an environment um, of inspiration and
mhm.
hope. So it's something I talk about in the book that what is this thing that creeps in that makes that environment suboptimal? It's fear,
Right,
right?
right. Hmm.
You're at the oil company. I was at an oil company, different end of the business, but we both started an oil company. And there's lots of people that look at that almost as it's almost like a 10-year job. If I just stay in this job for 20, 30 years and I don't make trouble, I'll get a nice pension at the end, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'll live a good life and I'll have some equity, built up. And that complacency just kills them. And so their negative reactions to someone who's working really hard
Hmm.
ends up being fear driven. You're going to make me look bad
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're working harder than me. And so therefore, I'm going to try to take your legs out and discourage you from working so hard and producing so much because it makes me look bad. That fear cycle that is creeps into companies causes that inertia because it's catchy. It
Yeah. Yeah.
pick up on it, right? Oh, he's leaving at 5 o'clock. I'm gonna leave. Why should I work overtime, right?
Oh,
Why should I
wow.
show up on Saturday?
Uh-huh.
And so that complacency creeps in and it expands like a bad apple in a barrel.
Oh, you're
It
right. Yeah.
so I talk about this a lot in the book about overcoming the cycle of fear that causes this inertia in companies. And there's a way to overcome it both individually and collectively. And the idea is to recognize what's driving it. And if fear is driving this negative cycle, fear comes from
Hmm.
ignorance, and then fear leads to uh, anger, frustration, sometimes hostility,
You
right?
you are you're hitting it on the head. I'm remembering I used to run a crew. We had about 19 people on it and all kinds of different walks of life. And you're walking me through all these things I'm just remembering as they have. It's so right. Once somebody starts to turn negative, it can spread through an office very quickly.
This behavior isn't unique to business. It goes back to the classroom. Remember the kid that raises his hand in the class?
Yeah, yeah.
He gets criticized. He gets picked on by his peers. It's the same thing. It's that you're going to make me look bad, dude. You're answering all the questions. You're going to give me a bad grade because you get an A. We should all get B minuses. Let's just, we don't want to stand out here. Don't be a brown nose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
No,
Right?
you're so right. Yeah, I'm chuckling because I've been removed from that life for a good 8 or 9 years now, and I'm chuckling because you're making me remember what it's like inside of big companies and how it works, man. I'm
Yeah, it's prevalent. It's
mhm.
prevalent. But
Wow.
there's an antidote to it. And that's
Yes,
what I talk about in the book is the antidote to fear is to replace ignorance with knowledge.
yes,
And
yes.
the more you can build a culture that is a culture of of knowledge instead of ignorance, because knowledge leads to understanding, understanding leads to hope, hope leads to happiness and peace and all that
Right.
stuff, right?
Hmm.
So this negative cycle of fear can be reversed in a company with a cycle of inspiration, knowledge, and hope. Well, it sounds a little bit Pollyannish, sounds like I should be on The View instead of,
No, no, not at all. Like
but
the
I promise you it works.
well,
It actually works.
the older I get, the more I realize that you're going to catch more flies with honey than you are with vinegar. And positivity is a state of mind and a mindset. And yeah, education should be a lifelong pursuit. And so when you factor all
Exactly.
those things in, if you can live with gratitude and positivity and setting out to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go learn and understand this. And the tools we've got available today there's nothing to stop you. And so
Exactly.
I,
Exactly.
I just wish I could get more people to pick up and do the learning part, you know?
Well, that's what I'm trying to encourage because, in fact, the subtitle of the book is "The Future is in Your Hands." Yeah, and that's on purpose. The future is in your hands because here's
Hmm.
what happened in that call it grammar school environment, in the small business environment, in the big corporation environment. What happens is something changes, and we react to that change.
Yes.
And when we react to that change, if fear triggers our reaction,
Hmm.
that's what contributes to all of that negativity and bad behavior that creates this inertia, right?
Right.
If we all recognize that we can't control the environment, we can't control things that happen in the workplace,
Hmm.
internally or on a macro basis, it shit happens, right?
Yes. Yes.
I took over Blockbuster thinking we were gonna have the best digital solution in the world, in 10 years, and then the market collapsed, and I
Right.
had to go from offense to defense.
Hmm.
Wasn't any fun. But it's not the change that occurs because that was out of my control. What was in my control is how I respond to that
Right.
change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what, if everybody can just realize we can control our own destiny and our collective destiny so much better if we manage our individual response to change, suppress that natural desire to have fear trigger our reaction, and instead use knowledge and understanding and just ask why, try to understand truth, right?
Yeah.
And that knowledge will lead us to a better reaction.
Well, I think a lot of us do react rather than respond. And in responding, we get time to think about the way that we are going to react to a situation. And you can't control things in business. I often say it's like boxing. You're going to get punched in the face. It's just a part of it. And you have to learn how to respond to being punched and react to it appropriately. I think it doesn't really get easier per se. You just get a lot better at handling the stuff.
Sure, sure. Well, and sometimes that punch in the face turns into an opportunity.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't feel like it at the time, but you learn from that punch in the face how to bob and weave.
Hmm.
And if you didn't get hit once or twice, you wouldn't be as good at being able to maneuver around it. And so
Correct.
one of the things I've done in the book is coin the expression that change equals opportunity. If we can learn that even if it's bad change, even if it's negative change,
Right.
there could be good in it.
Hmm. Yeah, there's always good to be found somewhere.
Yeah,
Even through tragedy, we can come out the other side and say, well, what did we learn? Like there's
exactly.
always something to be found somewhere. I want to touch a little bit more on your career at first at McDonald's and how you transitioned from a manager there, but really through the oil and into 7-Eleven, because it was 7-Eleven that you really made your name and became the top guy there in the early 2000s. Can you talk us through how that went? Because I think it's like I can remember a guy in Texas coming to me in the early 2000s, and I can't remember where it was. We worked on the road, and he was drunk in a bar, and he told me, and I'm not going to quote him exactly because he swore, but he told me that he was in charge of buying petrol stations for 7-Eleven, and 7-Eleven was about to become the biggest brand in Texas, and I better watch out for it. And I thought, all right, mate, that's pretty interesting. And sure enough, he was right. So
Yeah.
tell me how that happened.
Well, it was kind of an interesting story. Yeah, as we both mentioned, we started in the oil business. Right out of graduate school, I had an opportunity to go to Gulf Oil, if you
Hmm.
remember Gulf.
Yeah, yeah.
So here's like bigger than big. It was one of the Seven Sisters, the original, oil companies
Right.
out there. And shortly after joining the company, I was doing merger and acquisition analysis for the CFO of the
Hmm.
company at the time. And shortly after joining, they got in trouble. They tried to make an acquisition that the street didn't like, and
Hmm.
stock got slammed. T. Boone Pickens went after them. It was a hostile activist investor and trying
Yeah,
to.
I remember that guy.
Yeah, he was
Hmm.
aggressive. He
Yeah.
was aggressive. Around the same time, Carl Icahn, I think, was chasing Texaco, and so the oil companies were under a lot of pressure.
Hmm.
And Gulf merged with Chevron. Well, when that happened, it created, again, change created an opportunity.
Hmm.
Uh, and the opportunity for me was that for the past year, I had been doing analysis of a company called City Service.
Hmm.
They were a target for Gulf to acquire. Well, City Service and Gulf were both weakened by this failed acquisition attempt.
Right.
But City Service was broken up. Upstream went to Occidental Petroleum, downstream went to a company called the Southland Corporation.
Okay.
Aha, 7-Eleven.
Right.
The parent company of 7-Eleven bought an oil company, deciding that the next evolution of convenience was going to make buying gasoline more convenient.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And get back in the day, there used to be gas stations where garages with a guy with a greasy rag.
Hmm.
This you'd never even drink a cup of coffee at one of those things. And so 7-Eleven said, well, we'll put gasoline outside of all of our convenience stores. And now we've got a more convenient place to not only stop for your gasoline, but come in, grab a cup of coffee and some breakfast or whatever.
Those places always smelled like cigarettes and greasy rags. I'd forgotten that's a throwback to my childhood. Like, just always old cigarettes. Now I've got your attention. Just take a minute and pause. Imagine your business running the way it's supposed to. Your inbox is cleared, your social media posts are scheduled, leads are being called in real time, all while you're meeting for lunch with your newest client. You're free to focus on what actually matters, growing your company, closing deals, building your brand. A virtual assistant can transform how you work, and that is where I can help. If you are ready to see how a vetted, trained virtual assistant can take your business to the next level, go to followsam.live and just click on that big green button. It really is that simple. All right, thanks for listening. Back to the show.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was. Mechanics sitting there with a greasy rag.
Yes. Yeah, they had a very
wash your windshield.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Things I didn't expect to remember today.
No, I know. But it's evolution. That was convenient at the time when people would come in and they provided the convenience of a full service gasoline. They'd wash your window, check your oil.
Right.
You know, smoking cigarettes while they're pumping your gas.
It's what I remember. I can remember it over in England as well. Like it was just commonplace. So
exactly.
Anyway, 7-Eleven came about.
Yeah, so 7-Eleven buys this oil company, and now they go from a retailer to a company with a refining, marketing, all these refineries, and so they hired some people from the oil industry to come in, and they hired to be CEO a gentleman from Gulf Oil.
Wow.
Well, he then grabbed me and said, "You've been spending the last 2 years studying city service. You probably know more than anybody else about that operation. Come on in and help us turn it around." And so that's how I got to 7-Eleven via Citgo Petroleum, which was what the downstream operation of service.
That's an incredible story. And it just goes to show that like these guys are trying to solve a problem, and the best way to solve that problem is expansion through acquisition and bringing in experts that already know how to do it. Like,
exactly.
Wow.
Again, a crisis. Gulf Oil is now merged with Chevron. My job's uncertain, et cetera, et cetera. My high flying career with Gulf, because I was doing quite well at Gulf. All of a sudden, now I've got a new owner of the company. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to be one of those guys in 20 years looking out the window, watching my clock, waiting for the time to run so I can go home. And another opportunity opened up.
Right.
And that's the constant theme that I reference constantly throughout the book is that when we come across change in our career or in our business, it's gotten the change is inevitable. It's how we respond. I responded favorably to that environment and that change, saying, I'll get through this. There'll be an opportunity. And sure enough, by keeping my antenna up, working harder, not lesser, the opportunity door opened up and I ran through it, and it created a new opportunity at 7-Eleven.
That oftentimes when somebody buys a business, the first question out of their mouth is, who knows how to run this? And so if you're involved in an acquisition and your job is sucked up in that, if you go out of your way to prove that you're valuable to the company, chances are you'll get kept.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I had two opportunities. I could have stayed with that company or go to 7-Eleven. And 7-Eleven I saw as a new opportunity to learn more. And that was another important criteria throughout my career. I never allowed myself to get into a pigeonhole. And so many people do. They're a finance guy, so that's all they do. Or they're an accounting person or they're a marketing person. I kept moving from role to role. So while I started at Gulf in finance, technically, in the M&A group, working with the CFO, now at 7-Eleven, I had a chance to go into operations, running a retail gasoline business.
Yeah. Huge difference, but a great opportunity.
Great learning opportunity. Yeah.
Like throughout my career, it's always been, I'll get to the top of the pile and then I'll feel as though I've conquered that level. And I put that skill in my back pocket and I take it and go do something else.
Exactly.
I've never managed to settle at the top for more than 3 or 4 years of something before I'm ready to go and try something new.
But that's that entrepreneurial spirit. And that is what drives you. And a lot of people that start out as an entrepreneur never realize the importance of that constant learning process where, okay, I've peaked out here.
Mhm.
Time to let somebody else run this business and let me learn another aspect of the business or a new business.
That is exactly what happens. I enjoy it though. For me, it's like a challenge. It's like levels of a game that we can go and beat, and then once I've beaten them, I love turning around and teaching them to other people. I find that quite gratifying. Similar to
Exactly.
similar to what you're doing. I hope to write a book one day as well. So,
It's a lot of work.
I bet there's a lot of words in it. I've not made it. I've not made it, but about a third of the way in. But I will continue to work on it. I find it fascinating. Um, Tell us about how you became the CEO of 7-Eleven, and what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced before you handed that role off?
I didn't enter at the bottom. Certainly, I entered at uh, a reasonable position within a subsidiary of the company.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
how do you go from that regular job to the opportunity to be CEO of a Fortune 500 company? And it was probably, I think, a span of 15 years.
Oh wow.
Um, and here's the answer. It really came down to embracing change, having the confidence to do something about that change,
Hmm.
positive response to change, and then having clarity. And clarity comes in the form of both inbound clarity, listening, and outbound clarity, being able to communicate effectively and simplify basically what is the hardest thing for many business people to do is take a complex problem and make it simple,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
and yet if you can't simplify a strategic plan so that people can execute it, no one will follow it,
Correct.
right?
Goodness. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why I laughed. Half my time is explaining stuff in very simple formats. There's only so many
Exactly.
levers you can pull. And yeah, I think a lot of us make the mistake of overcomplicating things. But it's only after you've been through it a few times that you realize you've been doing that.
Exactly, exactly. So those 3 things, that ability to deal with change, have confidence, and then clarity or simplicity, those 3 things really propelled my career at 7-Eleven. Here's what happened. The gasoline division worked actually quite well. We had to transform the way we managed it and priced gasoline, et cetera, but we were outperforming even the inside of the stores. So we're
Oh,
doing
wow.
what yeah. And then, here's what happened. The company went private. They did a leveraged buyout. This is
Hmm.
back in the popular leveraged buyouts of the late 1980s occurred. They took the company private, but put a ton of debt on it to
Mm.
do this. And they did it at the time that, if you remember, something called Black Monday.
Yes. Yeah.
Financial markets collapsed. They went down by what, 30% or
Hmm.
something like that in a day.
Yeah.
Interest rates went crazy. 7-Eleven refinanced its debt out there, or took on debt to take it private at 17% interest.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a,
So
yeah.
people today are complaining about 8%,
Hmm.
right? 17%, $4 billion. You can imagine
Oh,
what the cash requirements, the EBITDA requirements were.
that's eye watering.
It
To
it is.
just to make
Staggering.
the interest on that note. Goodness me.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it was a matter of time. By 1991, the company was bankrupt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so here I am again facing crisis. All around me, people are head down, woe is me, life sucks, you know?
Well, yeah, I could see that being bankrupt
Yeah,
and all. Yeah.
it's hard, it's
Uh-huh.
hard, and, people have families to feed and all that kind of stuff, and their payroll is gonna be in question, and
Oh,
their
wow.
their career is in question, so there's a lot of negativity that occurs in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
Well, again, change, confidence, and clarity. Okay, here's a change. It's not fun, but we're 7-Eleven. I mean, the other side of this storm is gonna be a rainbow. We'll figure this out. We need to
Yeah.
reinvent our business here. This is a wake-up call,
Hmm.
but we've got this. We can do this. We've got scale. We're a global company. Let's figure it out. And that approach gave me an opportunity then, when we emerged from bankruptcy, I was actually because I was the guy still showing up on Saturdays and
Hmm.
and doing jobs outside of my area of responsibility, I had the privilege when emerging from bankruptcy to be the head of strategic planning for the whole company.
Oh, wow. What does they say? If you do more than you're paid for, eventually you'll be paid for more than you do.
Well, exactly. That's
Hmm.
and there's such a lesson there because I was running the gasoline business, but meanwhile, I was holding up my hand saying, "Hey, what worked over here will work inside the store as well. Let me help. I'll build the strategic plan. I'll put together a suggestion for how the company can reinvent itself." And that's what I was working on while everybody else was out looking for another job.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, but you stayed and you kept the lights on, and look what
And
happened.
kept the lights on. Yeah,
Yeah.
and was rewarded at the end for that. So I ended up being able to go from, um, running an operation
Hmm.
to then head of strategic planning, built the plan for the company emerging from bankruptcy. A couple of years later, they made me chief financial officer, and I was a guy with no accounting background at all. So
Oh,
here I
wow.
was, chief financial officer of a public company, but I was willing to do the things that the previous chief financial officer was reluctant to do.
Right.
Aggressive cost cutting, things that were hard decisions that needed to be made. So, as chief financial officer, then I was able to restructure the balance sheet, refinance the company.
Right.
Then they gave me the privilege of being chief operating officer, so I had a chance to then execute the plan I had developed, and then as CEO, sell it to Wall Street.
I love it. It sounds like you were the go-to guy for the investors, for the owners.
Well, I ended up being the go-to guy only because I kept learning.
Yeah, yeah,
So, outside of my comfort zone, I raise my hand. We're not getting it done at the chief financial officer role. I've got this.
right.
I can
And then you hire a couple of accountants, and you roll up your sleeves, get some books, and you get on with it.
You learn how to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think that's the mindset that we've all got to adopt. That's really
Exactly.
part of the key to winning is to understanding that sometimes you just got to hire people that are better than you and roll up your sleeves and crack on with some work.
And learn from them
Oh
because
yeah, yeah,
the role of a CEO, every CEO, having had the privilege of sitting in that chair for a couple years, every CEO would be a better CEO if they at least have a couple of years working at least in the financial arena
yeah, yeah, for
to
sure.
understand how a balance sheet works,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, yeah, completely. Like even the guys I work with, you have very few of them competent financially, like very few.
Right. Right.
And I hired a fractional CFO about 7 years ago, and it's just one of the best decisions ever. I don't have to worry about anything, and he's there whenever I need him. So like
Yeah,
it's best to just have an expert, I find.
it is. But it's also good to keep your mind open and keep learning because at the end of the day, you're going to have to be responsible for all of this
Oh
stuff.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
one of my favorite examples comes from the Enron period. Remember Enron?
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
the same bankers that were out encouraging Enron to do these special purpose entity
Hmm.
offshore tax shelters, really complicated tax shelter things that got Enron into trouble.
Hmm.
They were pitching me when I was CFO.
Ooh.
And you know why I didn't do any of those complicated structures? Because I couldn't understand them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You should never invest in something you can't understand. Like
Exac
rule number one. Oof.
exactly. So, the logic I had back to that confidence, clarity, if
Hmm.
I couldn't explain it, Einstein has a great quote. He says, "If you can't understand something well enough to explain it to a six-year-old, you don't understand it yourself."
No, he's right. Yeah.
I couldn't explain it to my board, never mind a six-year-old. So So I never did those structures, and it kept me out of trouble. And there's so many great lessons there. But net, if you say, well, how in the world did you get from where you were entering
Uh-huh.
7-Eleven in 15 or so years to have the privilege of being CEO of the company? That's how. A
Yeah.
constant process of dealing with change, having confidence to do something about it, and this learning process that in every role I had to keep learning.
Yeah, you just had the appetite to learn and the appetite to grow and the discipline to stay every day and be focused on what it was you were doing. Um,
Exactly.
I remember starting in law, and I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the best, and I needed a reason to be at the office, and so I took it on myself to make the coffee, and I learned to run the bun coffee maker, and I would show up early and make the coffee, and then when the boss showed up, he'd be like, "Oh, well, can you do this?" I'm like, "Yes, sir," and then I just go Google it and take care of it, and that it's just how it works. But let's talk about then what happened after 7-Eleven. Let's talk about Blockbuster, because I'm sure a lot of people are interested to hear that.
Sure. Yeah, there's probably even more valuable learnings in the Blockbuster story. Um, People have a tendency, in fact, I'll share with you the image on the cover of my book is by design an image of the globe,
Hmm.
and it represents perspective because when astronauts leave the Earth,
Yeah.
they look back at the Earth and they have a completely different perspective now
Yeah.
of our planet. And if you get back to Earth, we are then mired in perceptions.
Yeah.
Perception is often what causes that negative reaction
Absolutely.
and causes fear, right?
Yes. 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 Like
So the
how you perceive something like is different from everybody. It's almost like we have our own little bubbles of reality, and everybody's perception is different. And then you're zooming out and showing it from a way different angle.
Exactly, exactly. So here's the way to look at Blockbuster. If you look at it with perspective, you
Hmm.
say, "My goodness, this is a fabulous business model in dealing with change."
Hmm.
If you get stuck in perception, you'll say, "Well, the company didn't keep up with technology, so Netflix crushed them."
Well,
Right?
yeah, but like
That's the common
it's
perception.
when did this happen? What was it, about 2008, somewhere around there?
Yeah,
Remind.
2000 I joined the company in 2007.
Uh-huh.
By then, Netflix had already tried to come to Blockbuster to buy them out.
Yeah, I
Blockbuster,
mean,
no.
we I was there in 2007. Nobody knew what the internet was going to do.
No, no, nobody had
We had no idea that video
exactly,
streaming was coming on our phones. We had no idea that social media was going to happen. Like
exactly.
it's easy to look back now. It's 2024, so we're 16 years out. It's easy to look back now and go, these guys, like, who didn't see that coming? But none of us saw it coming. Like, none of
Exactly,
us.
exactly, exactly. The iPhone itself didn't launch until '07.
Right, right,
And then
right.
the iPad not until '09. So I'm out telling people in '07, "Yeah, we're gonna have Blockbuster stream movies, and we're gonna put it on your portable device." And they're like, "I'm not gonna watch a movie on my BlackBerry," you know?
Yeah, yeah. But now, how many people, teenagers, kids, I mean, streaming on iPads?
Oh,
They
yeah,
take them to
of
bed with
course.
them and watch.
Yeah,
But I remember we we had absolutely no idea, what the world was going to do, and we certainly weren't thinking about streaming internet on our Nokias. You
right,
know,
right.
um,
Now, we were, and that's why I joined the company, because
right.
after the successful sale of 7-Eleven in '05, I started looking at companies that needed a transformation.
Hmm.
And 2 that just popped up, they were absolute no-brainers were Radio Shack, if they were
Oh,
still selling parts and pieces, and they could have been I mean, Radio Shack could have been the technology agnostic Apple Store.
I wish they were still around.
I know, I
I
know.
miss being able to go over there. You could just get little things, just little bits and pieces. Always
Yeah,
useful.
but
Yeah.
that adherence to the bits and pieces kinda killed them because they could have been,
Hmm.
that place to, get the latest and greatest technology, but
That's true. Yeah.
it didn't have to be all Apple, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Welcome to Intermission.
So I don't run commercials on the show, but if I did, I'd remind you about our free community on School, the Clinic, a place where you can learn from me, the small business surgeon, and get direction, support, and accountability from others in the group. To create your free account, go to followsam.live and click Join the Clinic. All right, thanks for that. Back to the show.
Thank you. Come again.
could have made your Dell computer speak with your BlackBerry or your iPhone, and it could have all been integrated. And anyway, so it was attractive. It was an attractive transformation candidate, as was Blockbuster, because Blockbuster had already been competing with Netflix. They put together a DVD by mail business.
Yeah, they had a mail one. We used to get the mail one.
They did.
From Blockbuster. Yeah,
They did, and it was a brilliant strategy. They called it total access. You could you could get a video at the store or DVD by mail, and then versus Netflix, you could take it to the store if you didn't like what you had picked the week before.
Right.
So you could exchange it.
I don't. I just remember them showing up in the white and blue and yellow envelopes in the mail. I remember getting the stuff like that. So, like, your plan then was to take Blockbuster and turn them into a streaming platform.
Yes, the first thing we did in 2007 when I arrived, 3 months after arriving, is to buy the premier streaming platform that was in the marketplace.
Okay.
It was called Movie Link. Had been created by 5 of the 6 major studios.
Okay. So no problem with supply then?
No, in fact, their advantage was that they had already digitized 3,000 of the most popular new releases.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Netflix, when they finally did get into streaming, had a bunch of old movies that were fun for kids for $9.99 a month.
Right.
But it wasn't really the Blockbuster model, because in Blockbuster, remember the new release wall?
Oh, yeah. And
it was 80% of the sales. People wanted the new stuff.
See the new movies. Yeah. And you would wait till they come out and they'd be stacked 6 DVDs deep with the one on the cover. Yeah.
Exactly. Then you'd go to the bin to find out which ones had been returned.
Yeah. You'd be waiting there. And if a popular one would come in while you were waiting, you'd have them check.
Exactly. So you can see from that memory that the Netflix model was a very different model, and while it was relevant, it wasn't really competitive with Blockbuster's more new release related model. So we were more the the pay-per-view kind of company.
Part of that release model was there was almost a social aspect to it. Like, I remember keeping up a lot more with pop culture then, and there would always be people at the movie store, and people would always talk about movies. It's like now we all consume different bits of content from all different places, but back then it was the movies came out and that's what people watched. I think we lost a social aspect of that with Netflix.
We did. It was called a new release window. And what the studios would do is if they spent $500 million to make a movie, the next Top Gun, they put it in theaters first.
Right.
It would be theaters exclusively for a few months. And then at the end of the theater run, they would then let Blockbuster rent the movie for another 6 months, let's say.
Right.
And only then would they turn it loose for the all-you-can-eat buffet. And I call the Netflix model the all-you-can-eat buffet, because if you spent $500 million on a Top Gun, you're not going to throw it in the bin with the
No, we're not going to give that away. We're going to want to exchange some value for people to see it.
Exactly. That was what the Blockbuster window was, which was a very different model from the Netflix model. So all of this hindsight where people say, well, they should have competed with Netflix. Well, we did with the DVDs by mail, as Netflix had. We were positioned to compete more effectively for the new releases with the acquisition of this company called Movie Link that we renamed Blockbuster On Demand. So what we had by 2008 was something that we expanded this idea of total access.
Right.
In fact, people say, well, why was Jim the right guy for Blockbuster. It's a DVD rental company. He was a convenience guy.
Right.
My definition, my mission for Blockbuster was not DVD rentals. My mission for Blockbuster was convenient access to media entertainment.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. That's much different.
It's much different, whether it's Slurpees or beer and soft drinks or media entertainment. It was about providing it when customers wanted, where they wanted, and how they wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So that's what we were building. Kind of the digital aggregator, just as the stores were.
Yeah.
New releases, old movies, TV, everything right there. So that's what we were building in 2008. Many people forget that we successfully built that, and Netflix was kind of on the ropes at that
Right.
point. They didn't yet have streaming. They were
No
just
kidding.
yeah.
Yeah.
We turned down an opportunity to own the content that they were streaming, eventually started streaming. We could have locked it in exclusively, but it was $100 million a year commitment. And again, hindsight's 2020. I wish we had done it.
Well, yeah, but that's that's a lot of money to spend in a market that hasn't really been proven at the time.
You have no idea. We knew it was coming, but we didn't know if it would take 1 year, 2 years, 10 years.
Right.
Because it came down to bandwidth. How soon will bandwidth be broad enough? And we're just now to 5G, if you think about it, on our phone.
Yeah, it's taken a minute.
Yeah, it's taken a while. So we didn't know how long it would take to really make streaming mainstream enough, at least to lock in exclusivity. So we turned down exclusivity. When we turned it down, Netflix jumped in and bought it on a non-exclusive basis. So they would still be doing DVDs by mail.
So they had access to the same content that you had.
Yes, on a non-exclusive basis.
And so what was the outcome of that?
So the outcome is they started streaming. We were streaming. Everything was fine. We still had a huge competitive advantage because we had the old movies to stream, but we had new releases.
Right.
So that was a big advantage for Blockbuster and streaming. But still, by the end of 2008, nobody was really streaming yet.
No. And
kids on an Xbox, maybe a little.
Yeah, but even when you tried, you were right about bandwidth, because it was always very blocky and awkward to watch streaming. I can remember trying to watch it back then, and it wasn't really very good.
Exactly. So here's what happened. This is where change, again, comes into the picture. Macro environment. Lehman Brothers melts down.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
September of 2008. Worldwide financial crisis. Financial markets, catastrophic meltdown. We had to bail out General Motors, remember?
Oh, wow, yeah.
All these bank bailouts.
I'd forgot about that. All the bailouts. Yeah. Money just kind of came out of nowhere. Everything went a bit strange, didn't it?
Well, it's government printed a lot of money to be able to help companies stay afloat. And Blockbuster had $1 billion of debt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How did they have $1 billion of debt?
Well, it wasn't anybody's fault. They had been a part of Viacom until 2004, when Viacom spun them out into a separate entity.
Okay.
And did an IPO, if you will. They launched it as a new independent public company, but the company put on, when it did that IPO, $1 billion of debt.
Wow.
It had sufficient cash flow to support $1 billion of debt, so it wasn't an unusual transaction.
Okay.
But if you do the math, that happened in 2004. Dial forward 5 years when a big chunk of that debt comes due. 2009.
That money's not readily available.
By 2009, there was no money available. So Blockbuster had to refinance up to 1/3 of its debt when the banks were shut down.
Oh, yeah.
Completely closed.
I could see how that could get tricky.
Really tricky, yeah.
So what was that like, having to make those phone calls?
Oh, it was rough. It was rough. That's when my job literally went from transforming a company, rescuing a company.
Right.
and the leadership skills, the tools you use, everything is completely different. I had to respond to change. I had two options. I could have quit, said, I didn't start this mess. I'm out.
Right. That doesn't sound like what you do, though. No.
Well, no. In some ways, I think it could have been a lot easier, but or instead, the option was stay the course,
Mhm.
find strategic partners, get the company restructured, and fulfill that vision that we originally had.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I chose to stay. Um, and then it became a matter of finding strategic partners. So I had a whole array of candidates. I had a deal with Google at one point that would have been a game changer that today I'm not sure Netflix would be a household name today.
Oh,
Had
wow.
done a deal with Google because this deal envisioned everything free would be YouTube,
Hmm.
everything pay would be Blockbuster. TV, movies, old, new,
That
total
would that would have been something. Like to see a Google backed Blockbuster. That would have been something.
that would have been huge. And that would have been, I think, the game changer that would have made us the aggregator.
Hmm.
We would have locked in with that deal. We would have locked in that content exclusively because we had such a good distribution partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was almost guaranteed success. So when the news came out that Blockbuster may have to file for bankruptcy protection
Hmm.
because of our debt, Google killed the deal and said,
Oh, yeah.
we're out
That would
from that
scare everybody.
process." Yeah.
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 And it's
Just writing them off.
just the news, huh? Nothing else,
Just
just
a
the
rumor.
news.
It was a
Wow.
rumor. We had no intention of filing.
Wow.
That was the first straw that broke the camel's back. The ultimate straw was then the studios, which had us on 90-day credit terms. As a small business, your credit terms
Yeah.
pretty important, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, imagine having 90 days. We'd rent a DVD 20 times before we ever had to pay for it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Never a cash flow crisis, right?
Right. Right.
So the only thing that the debt problem caused was our ability to invest in digital. But
Hmm.
as far as bumping along in the DVD business for a long time, we were fine with 90-day credit terms from the studios. But when the rumor broke that we may have to file, not only did Google pull their distribution deal, but then the studios, first one, then two, then they all,
Like dominoes, huh?
like dominoes, took us from
Oh, man.
90-day credit to cash.
Oh, no.
So what happened then left us no choice.
Yeah.
So we had $300 million of debt that we had to refinance.
Hmm.
Now we had $300 million in cash flow, which is what that 90-day window represented.
That's a hole right there, man. Oh,
Giant hole in our
yeah.
cash flow. So we had no choice but to restructure the business. I still had strategics.
Hmm.
Dish Network stepped up. They ended up buying the company.
And the rest is history, eh?
Yeah. Well, what happened, Dish took us through a restructuring, came out the other side a winner. They owned the company.
Hmm.
Dish decided that their strategy was a little bit different. They wanted to go straight to mobility.
Okay.
So they didn't like like your memory, they weren't happy with the internet's level of streaming capability. They thought we'd be far better off if we went straight to 5G level bandwidth and downloading to your phone or your mobile device all content and then uploading it to whatever device, TV, whatever you want.
I could see a good argument for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a viable strategy.
Hmm.
Now they were a little early because the government didn't release that bandwidth
Mm.
until this is the year 2009-ish, 2010.
Uh-huh.
Government didn't release that bandwidth. You figured we're just now getting to 5G.
Hmm.
So Dish ultimately decided, it's not going to work. We're going to go ahead and close the stores down. And they didn't pursue developing the the digital strategy. So the Blockbuster brand's still owned by Dish, but it's sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Well, I still have my membership card.
As do
It's
many people. You'd be
maybe
surprised.
well, it's just a little bit of nostalgia that lives in an old wallet in a box in the closet, and it just it makes me smile every now and again. So yeah, I still got that. Man, what an absolutely fascinating story, Jim. I wish I could keep you longer. I know we've got a stop coming up soon, but I really want to circle back to your book. As much as I'd love to keep you another hour, mate, I would, I know, but your time is very valuable. So let's circle back to your book, Education is Freedom, and let's just touch on that for a couple of minutes before I let you go. Tell me a little bit, and I know we've touched on it, but let's just recap a little bit about what the book's about and what your mission is now that you're passionate about and that you're trying to bring into the public eye.
Yeah, I wrote the book with the intention of helping several different audiences. One, young people, because so many kids are out there saying, "Gee, there's no opportunity," and there is a ton of opportunity now because with technology today, we can learn anything, and if that's the key to
Yes.
opportunity, so my intention was to inspire young people to learn. But then, as I wrote the book, I realized, you know, learning is so fundamental to success in business, and that's really what propelled my career, that ability to adapt to change.
Yeah.
And my confidence comes from learning how to learn.
Yeah.
I I figured out this isn't rocket science. I mean, come on, I can learn accounting, and if I need to learn accounting to be a better CFO, I'll go back to school and study if I need to.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
can do this. This isn't, like I said, it's not rocket science. So that learning to learn thing was fundamental, and what I built basically in the book is a roadmap.
Hmm.
What to learn, how to learn, and why. And it's targeted at young professionals. It's targeted at young people, young professionals, older professionals that want to still do something with their career. And then here's the bonus that I discovered in the world of somewhat divisive politics
Hmm.
today. I realized that, part of the problem with society today is this cycle of fear.
Yeah, that's true.
All these issues that people are at each other's throats over
Hmm.
really are fixable if people will respond differently to the problem, use knowledge and and understanding to try to both deal with the change, whatever it is,
Hmm.
immigration or any of the issues that we're dealing with,
Yeah.
deal with the change, have have confidence that we can fix it. There's a solution to this,
Oh, yeah.
and then simplify it, break it down into what are the components of it, so we can together come up with solutions. So when I wrote the book, as I said, I started out thinking it was for kids. Then I realized, no, this is for companies. This is
Right.
for corporate. And then I realized, you know what? This is for society. We'd all be better
Yes.
off
Yeah.
if we can embrace this.
Yeah, I love it. And I really think that education and cooperation is really the key to a better future for all of us. I certainly make it a point to learn as much as I can about things. And I take at least one course a year on various stuff. And I encourage my kids to do the same as well. So, Jim, thank you for putting this book out there. I really, really, I'm enjoying what I've read so far.
Well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to spread the word, and I'll share an opportunity for your listeners if you want.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
please do. Yeah.
sure. My objective is for this to be a book that's given. I want this. We all have those people in our lives that need a little inspiration and a nudge. They're stuck in their career,
Hmm.
uh, don't know what they want to do next, whatever. Maybe they're just frustrated over the political environment and they want a different change of point of view. This
Yeah.
perspective.
Hmm.
So for any of your listeners, if someone wants to order 10 books, I'll send you one, a signed an autograph version for free.
Oh,
If
wonderful.
Yeah, if they reach out to me via the internet, jameswkeys.com, they can find my email address and everything out there, and
Perfect.
send me some evidence that you've ordered 10 books on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or anywhere, and I'll go ahead and send you a free copy.
Well, let's see what we can do about getting some of these books into some people's hands, man. That's a wonderful offer. Thank you so much.
That'd be great. Thanks for helping me spread the word.
Jim, it was my pleasure to interview you today, man. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you. I look forward to doing it again soon.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jim Keyes, the former CEO of both 7-Eleven and Blockbuster. If you have enjoyed the show today and would like to pick up a copy of his new book, Education is Freedom, head over to his website. It's in the show notes and you can find it at jameswkeys.com. All right, that's going to do it for the show for today. You'll be good and stay out of trouble, and I will see you for Friday Fire. Bye. All right, guys, that wraps up another episode of the Small Business Surgeon podcast. I hope that you have taken away some valuable insights from today's show. If you did and enjoyed it, be sure and hit that like and subscribe button and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're serious about growing your business and you want to be a part of a community of like-minded entrepreneurs, just go to followsam.live and join our free group, The Clinic. All right, I'll see you next week.